Okay. So now we also would, for today's Talmud class, we have to remember, where did we leave off? And we're somewhere in page 9. And we were talking about 2 ways of becoming a Kohen Gadol, right? Of becoming a high priest. In the first temple era, a high priest was anointed with special oil that was reserved for that purpose, and that was created originally back in our Torah readings that we have just been reading, when the Mishkan was first dedicated. So it's called Shemen HaMishcha, right? The oil of anointing. So, and then the person who would be anointed is the Kohen HaMashuach or HaMashiach, and the anointed high priest. In the second temple, we talked about the change, the second temple period. There were missing elements of the temple from the first temple that were lost. Either they were destroyed or they were carried away by the invading armies, or they were hidden. That's one of the legends. They know they, God forbid, they weren't destroyed, they weren't damaged, but King Josiah, Yoshiyahu, seeing that this was eventually what was going to happen in another 30 years or so, he made a secret hiding place for the ark and so on. And the oil was lost also, and we don't know where that secret place is. When we'll find it, God willing, in the right time. But then the question was, how do we proceed if we don't have those things? And there were different adjustments that were made. And the idea was that for a high priest, if we don't have the anointing oil, instead what we do is we do the ceremony of investment, literally putting on the vestments, putting on the 8 special garments that the high priest wears that differentiates the high priest from a regular priest. A regular priest wears 4 simple garments. They're of white linen. The high priest wears these elaborate, different, fancy and colorful kinds of garments with gemstones and so on. And just the act of putting those garments onto the high priest for the purpose of appointing that person as a high priest is sufficient. So that's what the historically what we did. And our Mishnah says, well, what is there any difference? Are they equally, is their stature, is their status the same, or are there differences? And we have some small differences between the high priest and the who's invested with anointing or with the garments. And then we have another question of alternate high priests. What about when a high priest, everything is fine, but they are debarred from functioning as a high priest for some kind of reason? They became ritually impure. Then they can't function as a high priest. So, and we need the high priest, let's say on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the most urgent time when this is needed. What are we supposed to do now if we don't have a high priest? So the answer is we appoint another high priest as a substitute. So then the question is, what's the relationship between these 2 high priests? What about the other high priest? When he comes back, let's say he has ritual impurity. So that night, he goes to mikveh, that night he becomes ritually pure again. So the following day, he's back to being the high priest. So what do we do with the secondary high priest? And what happens to that person? So that's where we're at now. So we started reading it. I'm going to start because we had such a break. I'm going to start reading again from 9b2 on the left-hand side, the very last two lines in the text, in the Gemara text, where we move on to that discussion. Okay, so let's start there. The Gemara asks, how have we established our Mishnah? Who's going to read for us, please? Need somebody to read.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
How does your arm feel after we twisted it?
Well, not bad. I'm
Good.
preparing for my second shot, so.
All right, good. Enjoy.
This is good.
I hope it all works out smoothly.
You and me both.
When is it?
Thank you. Thursday.
All right, good luck.
I'm getting my second one, and my son was able to finally get, although he's much younger, he was in another category. He's got his arranged for the same time, same place, same time. So we'll be able to go together again and get it taken care of. So we're on the way.
Very good.
Anyway, my arm feels good. So
Good.
The Gemara asks, how have we established our Mishnah as not following Rabbi Meir? Say, however, the end of the Mishnah. There is no difference between a Kohen Gadol who is serving and a Kohen Gadol who has retired from office, except the bull offered on Yom Kippur and the 10th of an ephah, which implies, but with regard to all their other matters, both this Kohen Gadol who is serving and this retired Kohen Gadol are identical, and both can now perform the service wearing the 8 vestments. This part of the Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir. As it was taught in the Baraita, excuse me, if a temporary disqualification occurred to the Kohen Gadol and they appointed a different Kohen in his stead to act as Kohen Gadol, the first Kohen Gadol, when he becomes fit again, returns to his service, replacing the substitute. And the second Kohen, though no longer the acting Kohen Gadol, has all the mitzvot of the high priesthood upon him. These are the words of Rabbi Meir.
Okay, so this is with a Braita and our Mishnah. We're going to compare it in a minute. So Rabbi Meir says that once a Kohen Gadol, always a Kohen Gadol, right? And each one is equally, accepted as being a Kohen Gadol. Okay, right?
Yes.
All mitzvot of the high priesthood are upon him. What does that mean exactly? Let's look at, what is that? Note 20.
Note 20. For example, he must wear the 8 vestments of the Kohen Gadol when performing the temple service. He may not let his hair grow excessively long. He may not rend his garments in mourning. He must marry only a virgin. He may not marry a widow, and he performs the temple service even while he is an onaim, mourner, on the day of a close relative's burial. This is according to Rashi.
Right. So all of these mitzvot, all of these requirements, sacred obligations, both positive and negative, apply to this second person. And it means theoretically we could have 2 guys running around in the temple with these costumes on, right? We could have the original and still the best, Kohen Gadol, and then this other person who was a Kohen Gadol for a day, and then was taken off of the office, but nevertheless he stays with these both perks and also with these limitations. Okay, that's what Rabbi Meir says. Now Rabbi Yossi
says, indeed, the first Kohen Gadol, when he becomes fit, returns to his service. But the second Kohen, who had been the substitute, is not fit to serve either as a Kohen Gadol, wearing the 8 vestments, or as an ordinary Kohen, wearing only 4 vestments. And Rabbi Yossi said...
Wait. So that's okay. Now Rabbi Yossi says, no. Second Kohen, the one who is the temporary Kohen as a fill-in, after he finishes his necessary helping out, he is discarded and he's stuck in a very strange place. He cannot function as a Kohen Gadol anymore. There is only one Kohen Gadol and it's not him, but he also can't function as a regular priest anymore either. Okay, and now we have a story.
And Rabbi Yossi said, in support of his view, it happened with Rabbi Yosef ben Ulam from Tzipori that a disqualification occurred to the Kohen Gadol, and they appointed him, Rabbi Yosef ben Ulam, in the Kohen Gadol's stead. And the incident came before the sages, and they said the following ruling. The first Kohen Gadol, when he became fit again, returns to his service. But the second Kohen, who had been the substitute, is not fit to serve either as a Kohen Gadol, wearing the 8 vestments, or as an ordinary Kohen, wearing only 4 vestments.
Okay, let's stop for a second before we get to the reasoning. So this is a historical episode that's recorded here and in a number of other places in rabbinic literature. And it's actually also mentioned in Josephus. So this was a story that happened at the time of Herod. So whatever it is, 100 years or so before, no, not whatever it is, 65 years before the temple was destroyed. And this guy was a substitute Kohen Gadol. And then the question was, after he was finished with his substitute teaching, so to speak, what happened then? And we have a number of ways of telling the story. Here, the story is told that the question was asked of the sages, and the sages made this determination. In the Tosefta, in Yoma, this is a story that's told about Yom Kippur, and because that's, like I said, the very sensitive time when the Kohen Gadol is really important. And the story is told there that Yosef ben Ulam sent a note to the king and said, now what? Now what do you want to do with me? And the king is recorded as saying in that story, isn't it enough that you were merited to stand for an hour in the presence of the Almighty and to serve the people of Israel? You're not satisfied with that? You're looking for more? And the story then says, so he understood from that he was removed totally from, and then there are 2 versions, either the high priesthood or the priesthood. Here, this is, he's removed from functioning as a priest in the temple altogether. So that's another way of telling it. And Josephus tells it also as being much more politically tinged. We know that this is a time when the high priesthood was a political football, and the different warring factions in the Jewish community supported different people as being the high priest. We know this has been going on for a couple 100 years already. The Hanukkah story is part of that also, when there were fights back and forth about different factions supporting different people to be their high priest. So there's not just a halachic question here, but there was also a question of power, of power politics. And in these stories, this high priest wannabe, so to speak, it's not a neutral question, now what, but rather the person was hoping to supplant the original high priest and take over, and he wasn't able to do so. So here we couch it as a halachic decision, but whether the story actually, was purely halachic or not is up for historians to think about. Okay, so now Rabbi Meir had his idea that each one is a high priest and each one has the standing of a high priest. Only one of them can do the rituals at any given time, but each one is okay. And the second one can be also apparently, each one can serve in the temple, but they need to wear the high priest's garments, right? And Rabbi Yossi says no, that he's caught in a catch-22. He can't serve with the high priest's garments because he's not a high priest. So that's in the notes. It explains that you're not allowed to intrude and wear the wrong clothing, either too many priestly garments or too few priestly garments. You're not allowed to do that. So he's stuck because he can't wear the 8 garments of the high priest, but he also, because apparently he was a high priest at one point, he can't wear the 4 garments either. He can't wear the simple costume. So therefore, he's out. Now we have Rabbi Yossi, or the Gemara, speaking on behalf of Rabbi Yossi, explaining why is he completely out? Why don't we let him? Why don't we accept Rabbi Meir's idea? So this is the last line. He may not serve. You got it? You got to unmute.
Sorry, I was being careful, but too overly careful. Let me do that again.
Last line on 9b2.
Yep. He may not serve wearing the 8 special vestments as a Kohen Gadol because of enmity that might arouse in the first Kohen Gadol. And he may not serve wearing only 4 vestments as an ordinary Kohen because of the principle that in sacred matters we elevate, but we do not lower the degree of sanctity. Since this substitute was once on the higher level of a Kohen Gadol, he may not be lowered to the level of an ordinary Kohen, even after being replaced by the original Kohen Gadol.
Okay, so here we have 2 considerations, and by putting them together, he ends up losing out both ways. So the first consideration is, why don't we just treat him with all of the perks and all of the accoutrements and laws having to do with a high priest? Good, let the original high priest do the Yom Kippur service and so on, but he should be still, able to be, dressed as a high priest and operate all the other temple service rituals that a priest can do. The answer is Mishum Eva, because of enmity, because of hatred, because of anger and resentment. So the editorial comment here is that it's not going to be good between the 2 high priests, right? The original high priest is going to be upset. Is that the only way to read this? Is that the only kind of enmity issues we might think of? Anybody have any other comments to add to that? Yeah.
Well, possibly the ordinary priests might be upset. All right, this guy was elevated for whatever reason. They drew lots, or I don't know, he had the right color shoes or what have you. And now the fact that he might still be allowed to be the high priest would strike them, would get their noses bent out of shape.
Okay, so you're saying there's another group that might feel disgruntled and angry at this particular high priest. Let's call him Yosef, like Yosef ben Ulam, that particular historical example.
Mm-hmm.
So either the high priest himself, that's what the editorial comment here says, will be angry at him or resentful or not happy with him. And now you're saying all of his fellow regular priests. He was once upon a time a regular priest, and then he got he got elevated. So there might be envy or resentment that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good for him. He got elevated, but now it's done. Now, right. Enough.
What else? Any other possibilities? Come on, reasons for human enmity are endless. So we can definitely think of a few other possible ways to go with this. What about the substitute high priest himself? What about once we let him be, dressed up like a high priest all the time, and yet the quote unquote real high priest is never going to let him do the high priestly stuff, right? He's going to look like a high priest, but he can't function like a high priest. So there's somebody standing in his way, right? He was able to be the high priest for a while, and this Shmegegi, who's now the high priest, is actually preventing him from continuing to enjoy that status. So maybe the enmity is his enmity toward the high priest, right? So that would be a third possibility, right? And then what I was saying before about the political realities might also be included in this. If this is a factional kind of situation where different people are being supported by different groups, so it's not just a particular in-house drama between this high priest and that high priest, or the other staff being upset about somebody getting a promotion that they didn't get. But this could just exacerbate the social tensions that are already out there about who the high priest should be. So I think that there's all of these possibilities are, I think, legitimate possibilities, and they're all showing that there's an attempt, or at least an expression by the sages, of wariness about this kind of murky situation that would lead to bad feelings. Now, remember that when the priests bless the community, the blessing is a very special kind of blessing. When we say that we're going to do the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbos candles, right? So we say, we're sanctified by the commandments, and God commanded us to light lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, to light the Shabbos candles, right? If we sit in a sukkah, God commanded us to do sacred acts, and leishev basukkah, and God commanded us to sit in the sukkah. When the priests get up to duchen, which is a commandment that is in the Torah, right? That they shall bless the children of Israel, and this is what they shall say, the threefold blessing. So right before they say the Yevarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, etc., all of the beautiful blessings of their priestly blessing, they also make a bracha, a blessing for fulfilling a commandment. And they say, and God commanded us, right? Livarech et amo Yisrael, to bless God's people Israel. And then there's an extra word, be'ahava, with love, right? So it's not enough to just say the blessing, Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. I mean, God commanded me to say these words of blessing, and after all, it's not me. I don't count. It's irrelevant what I feel. God will bless you and keep you. It's God's job. I'm supposed to just recite the words. But the blessing says, no, be'ahava, right? To bless the people with love. So this is the explicit challenge for the priest. And here, what the sages are saying is, there's stuff here that could contaminate that possibility of loving. Right? There's something here. There's ava. There's the possibility of enmity, which is the exact opposite of what we want the high priest to stand for. Of course, we have it in the morning prayers in our Siddur, in our tradition, and also in Pirkei Avot. We had it already. Be like the disciples of Aaron, right? Ohev shalom, v'rodev shalom, ohev et habriot, u'mekarvan laTorah. You love peace. You run after peace. You love every human being. Right, and you try to bring them close to Torah. Yeah, Geraldine.
Just a question then, was the person who's designated to substitute, is he allowed to decline that? Maybe he doesn't want to be put in that position.
So that's not necessarily a temple service. We're talking here temple service and things having related to the temple. For instance, nobody says that he can't eat truma. Right, the gifts that we give to the priests in order so that they have something to eat. Only a priest is eligible to eat truma. So he's a priest for that. But so his standing as a priest is unquestioned. But he's stuck in this no man's land when it comes to serving in the temple. Many priests didn't serve in the temple. Let's say a priest had, like I said, if they were ritually impure, they couldn't serve in the temple. or let's say, they lost a limb. They were a priest, but they couldn't serve in the temple because of the physical requirements that applied. So he's going to be a disqualified for temple service priest, but he still will be a priest. And the priestly blessing would be something that he still would be able to do. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. So that's why we don't want to have this other high priest. This reminds me of one of the early midrashim and myths about creation. Right, when God creates the two big luminaries, the sun and the moon. So the story that is told is that originally the sun and the moon were supposed to be equal. And the moon was supposed to be just as big and just as brilliant and just as self-generating of light as the sun. And then what happened was that the moon complained and didn't want to share the spotlight, so to speak, with the sun. And said, come on, it's not so, it doesn't, the moon went to God and said, you can't have, co-presidents or co-leaders, co-chair people or whatever. It's not good because it's going to be conducive to enmity and to infighting. So God says, you know what, you're so right. So therefore you won't be the co-leader, right? And the moon gets demoted, right? But there's that same idea that when you have two completely co-equal heads, it's a recipe for trouble. Okay, so if that's it, if we're going to try to avoid all of that trouble, so then the question is, well, why not then simply let the person go back to their original status as a regular priest? Okay, they can't be two high priests. Let him go back to being a regular priest. Why are we stopping him from being a regular priest? So what the answer is ma'alin bakodesh velo moridin, that we elevate in holiness, but we do not take holiness and diminish it. And this person has reached the height of holiness. This person has reached the Kohen Gadol status, all right, the great status of being the high priest. So a demotion is unacceptable, right? So taking him completely out of the game is preferable to actually putting him in a lower position. I'm thinking, sometimes we have this in the business world, in corporate life, in institutions. Somebody has been in the institution for a while, and then the head of the institution, leaves or resigns or dies, God forbid, or whatever, and now they're looking for a new head of the institution, right? And this person has been the assistant head of the institution or has been, something lower, and they want to be the head of the institution. And then if they don't get it, so many times what happens is that becomes the sign, I have to leave, right? They don't stay where they are as the the vice president or the whatever. They take it as that would be too whatever, too humiliating or
Humiliating.
too it would be bringing me down, right? Rather, you have to go up, you can't go down. So that's like it's not a perfect analogy, but we have this principle in Jewish life as well. For instance, let's say a person is writing a Torah and they start writing the Shema. And then for whatever reason, they decide, no, you know what? I'm not gonna write this for the Torah. Let me write it instead for a mezuzah. It's the same text, and so on. So the law is, if it was intended to be for the Torah, you can't reduce its holiness by bringing it down to be a mezuzah or to be tefillin, because ma'alin bakodesh velo moridin. We raise up levels of sanctity. We don't take something that was at a very high level or at a high level of sanctity and bring it down to a lower level. I want to take this opportunity to just share a little bit of a treat. You'll have to be patient for a second. Okay, and now I want to share the screen. And okay, so I want to get this smaller. Okay, there. So, all right, a little bit bigger. Can I get this like that? Okay. So what do we see here? Can everybody see what's on my screen? This is a Torah curtain. Okay. And I'm going to read to you what this is. So this is from an exhibition that was at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, 1985. So until about 30 years ago, this Torah art curtain was in the possession of Mr. Isaiah Luria of Jerusalem. According to family tradition, it was made from a coat which had belonged to Napoleon Bonaparte, who gave it to Rabbi Joseph, son of Jonah Luria of Moilov, during the French retreat from Moscow in 1812. Legend has it that Napoleon lost his way, and the rabbi, whom he encountered standing alone at the Mincha prayer, extended him aid. In gratitude, Napoleon gave him the splendid garment. Shortly afterwards, in 1816, the coat was made into the outer panel of a parochet and dedicated to a synagogue. The embroidered inscription gives the date, and in an acrostic poem, the names of the donors, Yosef and Yaakov Aaron Luria of Moilov and his wife, Fruma of Slutsk. So that's this over here. There's I didn't copy it, but there's an outline that follows the stitching, so that, for instance, these are made from the sleeves, and this is the two panels of the back of the jacket, and this is also sleeves over here and over here, and then there's the collar over here. So this is from an exhibition that's called Ma'alin Bakodesh. And here we have another example of that. Ma'alin Bakodesh means we raise up in holiness. So for instance, this was a regular garment, right? Obviously, not just anybody's garment. It was Napoleon's garment. So even better, but it was a garment, and it was made into a Torah curtain. The principle of Ma'alin Bakodesh velo moridin means that this is something that was elevated in holiness. What if we have a Torah curtain and we decide it doesn't fit our decor, it doesn't fit the color scheme of the shul, we have too many Torah curtains, it's getting a little frayed on the edges? Could we cut it down and use it as a jacket for somebody? The answer is no, because we raise to holiness, but we cannot lower something from its holiness, right? So it's a one-way street. This is another example from that exhibition. And this is the cover. It says, as I said, Ma'alin Bakodesh. And this is, if you see over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. candle holders. What is this? It's a Chanukiah.
Menorah.
It's a Hanukkah menorah. It's a
This one,
Chanukiah. This comes from Morocco. Okay, this is a 19th century Moroccan Chanukiah, and it's made out of tin. It's made out of metal, and it's all put together, kind of, stitched together with wire and stuff. And here's the back of it. Right, sardines in olive oil. This is a Chanukiah that's patched together from sardine cans.
Wow.
So again, the sardine cans are not holy, but then we raise up something that's not holy and we raise it up into holiness. And here's a cute example also. So these are Seder plates, right? So this one was a knockoff from this one. This is the original. This original, there you say Zroa, Moror, Beitza, right? But can you see these shapes? This was originally an oyster tray. This was originally a plate to serve the delicacy of oysters. So talk about elevating in holiness, right? And all they did was they painted over, it's an enamel kind of, porcelain kind of thing. And they painted the names, right? They gave it a good washing. And that's it. And this is copying that design. This was this was originally made as a Seder plate. Here we have the Magen David in the middle instead of just this circle, but copying this. What a great idea somebody had. That's so beautiful. You put all the items on these wonderful little indentations. So this was the idea. So again, can you take a Seder plate and turn it into an oyster platter? No, right? Ma'alin b'kodesh velo moridin. Okay, so just some intriguing examples from our wonderful culture.
Thank you for that.
So back to here. So this is Rabbi Yossi's theory that in the end, it turns out that this substitute Kohen Gadol gets hit from both sides, right? And now let's look at, so we're back to the Gemara. Thus.
I can't
Thus.
see you.
Can't see, oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, look at that. You disappeared.
I disappeared.
There you are. All right.
Good. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, so now we're on that second paragraph. Thus we see
from this Baraita that the view expressed in the last part of our Mishnah, that a retired Kohen Gadol is almost entirely like the serving Kohen Gadol, even in regard to performing the service wearing the 8 vestments, is the view of Rabbi Meir. Accordingly, the Gemara concludes its question. Is it possible that the beginning of the Mishnah is the opinion of the rabbis and the end of the Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir?
Right. So this is all one long argument starting from the top or even the bottom line on 9b2 on the left-hand side. How have we established our Mishnah? Not following Rabbi Meir, right? That's in the opinion about the two ways of making a Kohen Gadol with anointing oil, not sardine oil, by the way, or by just adding the garments. That we saw that the Mishnah decides the law against Rabbi Meir. And now with this other example of high priests, we see that apparently the Mishnah doesn't follow Rabbi Yossi, but it follows Rabbi Meir, because it says that the other substitute Kohen Gadol is still accorded status of Kohen Gadol, except for a minor detail, right? So that's like Rabbi Meir. So the Mishnah seems to be inconsistent. Is this according to Rabbi Meir or not? Our answers.
Maybe the first part is according to The rabbis in the second part, according to Rabbi Meir. The Gemara answers, Rav Chisda said, yes. The beginning of the Mishnah is the view of the sages, and the end of the Mishnah is the view of Rabbi Meir. The Mishnah indeed combines the statements of two different Tanaim.
Right. So that's what Rav Chisda says, right? In other words, the Mishnah is not meant to be a law book where everything is coherently connected one to the other. It can have different opinions from different sages without necessarily crediting who's thinking what, but it's a compilation. It's a compilation of different voices, and they can come from different points of view, and that's okay. Okay, a very important statement that we have seen actually its relevance and its legitimacy again and again and again. Alternatively,
Rav Yosef says, actually, the Mishnah is the view of Rebbe, who takes his view from conflicting Tanaim, ruling in accordance with the rabbis in the first matter and in accordance with Rabbi Meir in the second.
Okay, so what's the difference between, so this is Rebbe, and he holds like the Chachamim in the first part of the Mishnah, and he holds like Rabbi Meir in the second part of the Mishnah. What's the difference between that answer and Rav Chisda's answer?
I guess in the identification of who's doing the combining.
So according to the second answer, we know it's Rabbi, right? It's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right?
Right.
In Rav Chisda's answer, he just leaves that alone.
Right.
Right. He just doesn't give, it's anonymous, right? What's called Stam Mishnah, an anonymous Mishnah. Okay, is that the only difference, so that the second one just actually gives us a name for it? I would suggest there is actually a conceptual difference between the two answers. Rav Chisda is not saying conceptually the same thing. He's, just substituting anonymous for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He's saying something different. Right? According to the alternative answer, the last answer, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi has come to his own conclusions. And he has decided, I see the merits of the Chachamim in talking about this situation of high priesthood, and I agree with them. And that doesn't bind me to agree with Chachamim in this other situation. I actually agree with Rabbi Meir in the second situation, in the second context of high priesthood. And therefore, I'm putting in this Mishnah with what I think is right. And I don't have to, I'm not bound by party loyalty. I always have to support Rabbi Meir. I always have to support the Chachamim. That's the second answer. That means that the Mishnah is giving us a fully developed perspective of one sage or one school, which we can see is a kind of a combination of earlier or other perspectives, and it's a little eclectic, right? But nevertheless, it's a fully formed perspective on its own. What Rav Chisda is saying is, you're not to look for a fully formed perspective in the Mishnah.
Mm-hmm.
There is no fully formed perspective. There are competing ideas, and there is no coming down with a decision in the Mishnah. The Mishnah happens to record two different schools of thought, and it's an incomplete compilation. We know that already because we have baraitas all the time. We have these external records of rabbinic discussions that are not included in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a notebook that is, inclusive up to a certain point of different materials, but not all materials, and not as a definitive collection. These are the materials that count, and no other materials count, and these materials all come together and they all cohere. No, these are two different theories of what the Mishnah is doing. Right? So that's, I think, a major difference. It's not just anonymous versus a named voice, but it's whether or not we're looking for normative statements altogether. does the Mishnah try to conclusively give us a halacha or not? And the second answer tends towards saying, well, Rabbi tried here. He tried to close the debate and give a little bit, to this group and a little bit to that group. And in Rav Chisda's answer, no, it's much more agnostic than that. It's no, we don't have a definitive statement. We just simply have a combination of two different schools teachings about two different things. Okay, Sylvia, you want to say something?
Yeah, it just goes back to my overall thinking that this is a wonderful explanation of the fact that the interpretation of the Torah and the Talmud thereafter leaves open the door for ongoing thinking and decision making based on the society that we're currently living in.
Okay.
It unfreezes. It certainly, anyone who says that Judaism is frozen just looks at this.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and here, though, of course, it wasn't simply changes of interpretation over time, but competing interpretations,
Right.
competing decisions right there at the same time.
That's fine. That's fine too. And we live in a society where that is absolutely obvious. We have very competing interpretations of how to be Jewish in today's world.
Right. Although usually they're not recorded, the competing opinions are not recorded side by side without editorial comment. Right? That's not so usual. Right?
Well, it's gotten so big, it's much harder to.
No, it's also, most of the time, depending on what you look, if you read certain things, there'll be maybe an inclusion of a competing idea, but it will highlight that it's a competing idea. It will say other people think this, but we think this, etc., right? Sometimes, anyway. The point is here, according to Rav Chisda, it's very, very parav, right? And in fact, it leaves open questions. Why is it zigzagging? Why is it not going all the way in one direction or the other? What kind of choice is that to leave it open like that?
Or another way of looking at it is that in today's, and this is not just Judaism, in today's world, there is no one right way.
Yeah. Unless you think that there is, right? That's the way. Right? I saw some article that argued that an unforeseen consequence of the fading of religious relevance for people is that all of the fights that used to be between religions are now transferred over into the secular realm. So now we fight about secular things as if they're religious wars. The secular option, it was something that was actually a lifesaver, right? It stopped religious wars. It stopped people being able to start inquisitions and crusades and so on and so forth. But as that process kept on going longer and longer, and we had to get to the point today, we have back to the enmity point that we had earlier today. People are hungry for enmity, right? So I need an enemy. I need to be angry at somebody. So if I'm a Democrat, I hate Republicans. If I'm a Republican, I hate Democrats. So all of these secular things, if I'm a free marketer, I hate the socialists. If I'm a socialist, I hate the neoliberals. Things that were originally supposed to be just open ideas in the marketplace of ideas, so to speak, and a refreshing change from religious dogmatism that brought, bloodshed and conflict all over the place. Kasha, what's going on? You getting involved in some enmity? Hold on. So this was an article that argued that now we've transferred our religious passions into these secular things. Hold on a second, please.
Just let it be noted that it's not always my dogs.
Right.
And I was just going to add to that, that the next level of all that is the role that team sports play.
Oh, look at that.
It's a substitute for war.
Right. And people, unfortunately, it's less so, I think, in the United States, but in Europe, for instance,
Soccer.
it can get very bloody.
Yeah.
It can actually get into physical violence. Yeah, yeah.
That, by the way, is what led George Orwell to conclude that he hated sports, precisely because it was just a kind of thinly disguised warfare, and he didn't want to have any part of any of it.
Good.
I used to have that on my door in my office at school because I hated sports so much.
Hey, that won you a lot of friends among
Yeah, oh
your
yeah,
students,
it won me vast fans
right?
on all sides.
All right. So good. So guess what? We're ready to start another Mishnah.
Indeed.
And if you take a peek at the next page, this discussion on this Mishnah is even less than the Mishnah itself almost. So
It's true.
we'll go right along in with it.
Okay.
But this Mishnah, as I've mentioned before, is part of a string of Mishnayot, even if they don't have legal. Hold on a second. Now Kasha decided she wants to come back. She already checked out what was going on at the front door. Hold on. Come on, hurry up, hurry up. Yeah, excuse me. These Mishnayot are a part of a string of Mishnayot that talk about historical transitions in the way that the Jewish community was structured regarding religious ceremonial observance. So we've had discussions about the Kohen Gadol, the first temple and the second temple. And now we're going to have another discussion. And we had some other stuff before that. We had, yeah, I mean, that's the main thing. Now we're going to have another discussion that's rooted in historical shifts in the way that the Jewish people served God. So here we go.
Okay.
There's a little introductory, a couple of paragraphs to give us the background information.
Bama, literally high place, is the common scriptural term for any altar other than the altar of the tabernacle or temple. During most of Israel's history, it was forbidden to offer sacrifices on a bama. However, the ban was not applicable during the short periods in which the tabernacle stood in cities Gilgal, Nob, and Gibeon. There are two kinds of bama. Major bama, bama gedola, also known as bama tzibur, the communal bama, was the altar of the public, and communal offerings were sacrificed on it. Bama katana, the minor bama, also known as the bama yachid, the private bama, was the altar of an individual who chose a location, erected a bama, and brought his personal voluntary offerings.
Okay, so just to supplement that a little bit. So the word bama means a high place. We use the word bima for the high part of the synagogue, the platform by the ark that's in front of the shul, where it's a little bit higher up. Where are we? We're at 9b3. 9b3, middle of the page. So that the idea of a bama or a bima is this raised platform, and an altar. You know, we think of it, an altar, we can think of like a little raised box that the animal or the offering gets placed on. But it was also the bama, the altar, for instance, in the temple was huge, and you walked up. Human beings could stand up there, and you know, it was big enough for a bunch of people to stand up on top. And in many places, in many cultures, the altar was meant for the public to see what was going on and to take a little bit of that phrase that we had before: we raise up in holiness and we do not descend in holiness. The idea was that the holy place of offering should be raised up from the rest of the you know, the surroundings. So both for practical purposes and also as for symbolic purposes, the altar, the place of offering, was higher. So if we look back at what happens in the Torah, people are offering sacrifices from day one, right? So in that sense, altars are ubiquitous throughout the world. And Cain and Abel and Noah and all and the patriarchs and so on, everybody's creating an altar to sacrifice to God, and the other communities, the other peoples are doing the same thing. Then what we have, as we just been reading over the last couple of months, we have this idea of we're going to have a tabernacle for God. So even though it's famous as an insistence in Deuteronomy, only one altar and no other altar, but the implication is already there from the building of the tabernacle, that the tabernacle was the centralized altar, and there would not be then other altars all around. Instead, everybody is congregated and placed. It's a planned community, that everybody is planned to be on the sides around the central altar, and that's where Israel meets God, the Ohel Moed, and that's where Israel serves God, and that's where God wants us to be. So that's the tabernacle. But of course, history intervenes, and guess what? We get into the land of Israel. So what happens now? What is the role of each individual in their impulse to serve God? Can they make their own altar or not? And what about the people themselves as a community? What status does any temporary place have? Just like we had the question before about the high priest. The high priest is high priest for a day or a week, then they stop. Are they still high priests or not? What's their standing? Here we have the question of, well, if we have a centralized altar, does that that carries the implication that it forbids anybody else having an altar? What happens if that altar moves? When does an altar foreclose everybody else's individual avenues to God, and you can only go to that altar? So that's the question that we have in the background of this Mishnah. And again, let's remember that there are hundreds of years where there is no Jerusalem, there is no temple. So where is the temple? Where are people doing things? And if we look in the book of Shoftim, for instance, people are making altars all over the place. So again, when is it up to each individual to decide whether they want to make an altar? When are you compelled by communal pressure to say no? If you want to worship God as a good Jew, you have to do that in this one place. Okay. So now we get to the Mishnah.
Okay. There is no difference between the offerings that may be brought on a major bama and those which may be brought on a minor bama during the era that bamot were permitted, except the Pesach offerings, which may be brought only on the major bama. This is the general rule. Any offering that is vowed or donated may be brought on a minor bama, but any offering that is not vowed or donated, that is obligatory offerings, may not be brought on a minor bama.
Okay, so now let's look at just the bracketed note in 31.
In 31. Private obligatory offerings, for example, an individual's chatat or asham, may not be brought on any bama, either major or minor. All offerings, though, were brought at the Shiloh tabernacle, which was not a bama, but a full-fledged tabernacle.
Okay, so the Mishnah says things that are vowed or donated may be brought on a minor bama, a personal bama. So those are offerings that are voluntary. I decided to bring an offering, but what we have here is, number one, any offering that is not vowed or donated. If it's an obligatory offering, It may not be brought on a personal bama. So this includes all of the holiday offerings, the Shabbat offerings, all of the things that are offered as part of our collective national service to God. The Yom Kippur offering, that's an obligatory offering. It's on behalf of the entire people of Israel. That can't be brought in any personal altar. It has to be brought in the altar that has been designated as the national shrine. Personal gifts to God can be brought on a personal altar in such times when there is no established national shrine that's exclusive. And then there's the intermediate kinds of sacrifices, personal sacrifices that are obligatory. Personal sacrifices that are obligatory cannot be brought on any bama until such time as a centralized temple shrine is created. This is the way that the rabbis had looked back. Remember, the rabbis' discussion, this whole discussion is happening after the second temple has been destroyed.
Good.
So it's ancient history, but they're trying to set up a theory of when is variety acceptable and when does it have to be uniform and completely controlled in a central place. Okay, so note also, if you look at the first editorial paragraph in the Mishnah, right? The ban against individual sacrifices was not applicable during short periods in which the tabernacle stood in the cities of Gilgal, Nov, and Gibeah. But we have mentioned down here in the last note that we just read, Shiloh. So Shiloh was a temporary, historically speaking, a temporary exclusive national shrine that compelled everybody in the theory that the rabbis are advancing here to either go there or you can't give your own obligatory sacrifices at all. You have to come to Shiloh.
Do I understand that the temple altar is above both of these? Is that correct?
Above in what sense?
Well, is in the sense of the private and the public, the communal, and then on top and more holy than all of those is the altar in the temple while it
Right, but the temple, but it didn't exist yet.
No, but once it
Once it came into being,
that was
then,
the only.
right, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to get into the Gemara. We have a couple of minutes. Maybe we'll even finish this whole Gemara. Go ahead.
Wonderful. I'll read faster. The Gemara questions the Mishnah's first ruling. Is the only difference between a major and a minor bama the Pesach offerings and nothing else? Certainly there are other offerings that can be brought only on the major bama, as the Mishnah itself continues that obligatory offerings may not be brought on a minor bama, implying that they are brought on a major bama. Huh?
Okay, look at 32.
Note 32. That is, on a major bama, the obligatory communal offerings are brought, such as the daily Tamid offerings and the additional Musaf offerings for Rosh Chodesh and festivals. That's Rashi's interpretation.
Okay.
Rosh.
All right. That's
Okay.
Okay, so these are there are many sacrifices that are brought in the communal bama that are not brought on the individual bama. So why is it saying that the only difference is the paschal sacrifice? So the Gemara answers.
The Gemara answers, say rather that the Mishnah means anything like the Pesach offerings may be brought on a major bama, but not on a minor one. This includes all obligatory offerings that, like the Pesach offering, have a fixed date and excludes those that do not have a fixed date.
Okay, so why was the paschal offering mentioned? Because the paschal offering is not like a sin offering. A sin offering has no set date.
Right.
You know, who knows when you're going to sin? And then whenever you sin, then you eventually have to bring an offering to God. But the Pesach, that has no time specificity. But the Pesach offering is an obligatory offering that has a very specific date tied to it. So that's what the Mishnah means. What the Mishnah means is all of these other obligatory sacrifices that are time bound, like Rosh Chodesh, like Shabbat, right? Like the festivals, they can only be brought on the major bama, on the communal bama. They can't be brought on the individual bama.
Yeah,
Okay?
but
Yes.
in a way, the Pesach is a commemorative offering. And the
Right.
others are more, asking for whatever they were asking for.
No, a festival offering, the communal festival offering is exactly that. It's a commemorative offering. There are communal offerings for Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, and for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a little technically we have all these things with, atonement and so on. But let's say, the Paschal, the other Paschal sacrifices, not the Paschal lamb. The Paschal lamb is this funny thing because the Paschal lamb is an individual sacrifice that has communal significance. But the Shabbat offering was offered in the shrine, whichever shrine it was, in honor of Shabbat. And there was a Passover. That's why we have the egg. The egg on the Seder plate is about the festival offering, not the Paschal offering, right? There was a festival offering on Passover, on Sukkot, on Shavuot, to just simply commemorate the fact that it's a festival. So that was a communally obligatory observance, and it couldn't be brought in a private altar. It had to be brought in the communal altar. Okay, quick.
Who is the Tana that our Mishnah follows in ruling that obligatory offerings are brought on a major bama only if they have a fixed date? The Gemara replies, it is Rabbi Shimon, for it was taught in a Baraita. Rabbi Shimon says, even the community did not offer obligatory offerings on the major bama except for the Pesach offering and those obligatory offerings that have a fixed date. But obligatory offerings that do not have a fixed date were not offered either here on a minor bama or here on a major bama.
Okay, now let's look at 34.
Note 34. Rabbi Shimon's view is cited in Zevachim 117a. The sages there, however, disagree and rule that all communal offerings which could be brought in the wilderness tabernacle could be brought in the Gilgal tabernacle, which was a major bama. Accordingly, the communal bull chatat for inadvertent transgression, which could be brought in the wilderness tabernacle, could be brought in Gilgal tabernacle. Thus, our Mishnah cannot reflect the view of the sages, since it limits the obligatory offerings brought on a major bama to those that have a fixed date, like the Pesach offering. Thus,
Okay.
Rashi's interpretation.
So I don't want to go into all of these details about sacrifice, which other sacrifice, but I want to bring up the idea that the sages here are struggling with imagining a Jewish way of life before it has been completely codified the way they know it. Right? That's the point of this whole discussion. Before we get to a Jerusalem temple, how did this communal individual dynamic play itself out? What kind of sacrifices were actually active? Is it possible to conceive of the biblical set of sacrifices as not being possible to be brought? Just because we don't have a temple yet? What do we imagine was going on when there wasn't this firmly established by the king? Solomon builds the temple for the whole people. What do we imagine was going on for people from the rabbi's perspective who were loyal to the Torah? And that's where we get this hodgepodgey idea that, well, apparently some people did this on their own, but they had to go to whatever was temporarily designated as a national shrine to do certain national things. But then there are certain examples of sacrifices that don't fit one or the other. And how do we judge certain places? The beginning list is Gilgal, Nov, and Gibeon. Shiloh will be the subject of our next Mishnah. And now we see that Gilgal is also a controversial place. Historically speaking, was Gilgal a well-established place, or was it just a temporary way station? So this is the rabbis struggling not only with just historical data, but also with imagining retroactively what was a faithful Jewish community able to do and how did they do it? Because it doesn't quite yet fit into the straitjacket of the Judaism that they themselves inherited in the temple, right? There's a whole Wild West kind of period of Jewish history where they want to make it not as it says actually in the book of Judges. Everybody just did whatever the heck they wanted. Isha yashar be'einav ya'aseh. That's what the book of Judges said. But the sages, along with inheriting from the prophets as well, wanted to live with a certain picture that there were standard expectations that had to be met. And then you have these disagreements about what was the standard expectation, what was the leeway, what was it possible. If you wanted to be a true Jew to the core, what could you do on your own? What did you have to go and connect up with the community about? That's where all of these different variations come out of. We're going to stop here, and hopefully next week we'll be able to continue with our next Mishnah, where this is going to come in full force, this question. Okay?
Yasher koach.
All right.
Yasher koach. Thank you very
Everybody.
much.